spoilers ahead that encompass Season 2 of Beastars. Also check out my books in the description if you enjoy this video. Let's get to it. Meat. A lot of people like to eat this stuff. I mean, I don't, but I am an outlier. So, what about Beastars? Well, there are a bunch of carnivores in Beastars, but they don't quite correspond with real-world carnivores, in that those who are from hypercarnivore species do not seem to require the consumption of meat. Makes the whole thing quite the peculiar situation that does not much allow for us to have a one-to-one relation between carnivores in this manga/anime and real-world carnivores. Let's ignore all that and look at this anyway because it could be fun. So, this entire video is basically a rewrite and more informalized version of my MA dissertation, which was all about Beastars and meat and sex and stuff. Very entertaining stuff, clearly. This means that while I will be drawing from my own conclusions and ideas and all that jazz, I will not be quite as academic. If you want the academic version, you'll have to read the actual dissertation. For those who don't want to do that, we need to start with the Beggar. The Beggar is the first true introduction to meat in the world of Beastars. This Beggar is encountered by Legacy and a group of his fellow drama club carnivores. This guy is the whole reason I wrote that dissertation in the first place. When they meet him, he holds up his fingers and asks all of them if they would like to purchase any of his fingers. They can just bite it right off the bone, just chow away, but please, make it a clean bite. It's a rather horrifying and dreadful thing. Until this point in the narrative, all of the animals in this world were not non-human animals like we have in our world. They were just animals, and all animals are people in this world. Much like how in our world all humans are people, the entirety of society is like this in Beastars. Until this point in the narrative, we have seen that there are distinctions between herbivores and carnivores, and we even know that carnivores have a desire to chase down and consume herbivores, but we've never actually seen meat. The appearance of the Beggar also allows for us to see that class is intermingled with this desire for flesh, because it is a poor herbivore who is selling all that is left for him to sell. He can only sell his body in a very literal sense. This social class divide in terms of wealth is one thing, but there is also a racial divide between herbivores and carnivores are on the side that allows them to consume the other. Now, for those who know their Beastars well, there actually is the consumption of carnivores in this world, but it is not very common at all. It is more along the lines of being an exception than any kind of a norm. It also feels like something that was thrown into the world building and then not given any real attention, so my attention will also be predominantly focused on the herbivores who are consumed in this world. Herbivores throughout the narrative are portrayed as the victims. Even hardy herbivores who, in the real world, would be able to stand up to a carnivore are generally incapable of doing so here. The carnivores are those who have aggressive power over the herbivores, but what about the real world? Well, in the real world, we tend to consume herbivores too. This is where we can mix our discussion of Beastars with the real world and those pesky things that call themselves humans. You see, in the real world, many humans eat animals, but before we can eat animals, we generally need to de-animalize them. We need to render them into something that is not an animal, something that can disguise the violence that has been done to them. We call this thing meat. We commit fundamental violence against the non-human animals that we plan to eat. Not only when we kill them, but also when we imprison them and subject them to unwanted and unneeded medical procedures for a number of different reasons. And then, after we have killed them, we do not give them the respect that we typically give to a human corpse. We do not bury them. Instead, we dissect them into de-animalized pieces, cook them, and then eat them. What we don't eat, we just throw away. We have no respect for their corpses. This even led me, in my own dissertation, to define meat as de-animalized animal flesh intended for consumption. When we de-animalize an animal, we refuse to allow it to be an animal. It must be something else. I'm sure you've heard the term dehumanize, which is something that we do to groups that we don't want to share an affinity with. We dehumanize serial killers because they can't be like the rest of us, and we dehumanize entire races of people when we hold prejudiced views against them. This dehumanization allows us to do terrible things to those groups that we have dehumanized. They deserve imprisonment and death. They're not even people. Well, the same can be said of the animals that we want to eat. We have to deny that they were ever living, sentient animals. Instead, we have to pretend that they are just food. This is where we get into the idea of the absent referent. This concept is explored throughout much of the work of Carol J. Adams, but predominantly the sexual politics of meat and the pornography of meat. Well, what is it? It's the idea that we cannot see meat as ever having been an animal. We must pretend that it is disconnected from the inherent violence that is required to produce said meat in the first place. It is a reference to something that has become purposefully absent. If you want the proof of this, simply discuss the treatment of cows while eating beef around the dinner table. Everyone knows that the cows were tortured and murdered for that meat, but hey, it's real tasty, so you will often shout down those people who remind you that what you are eating is ethically wrong to eat. We want to eat our carcasses in peace, so please stop spoiling our meal. So why the hell am I telling you this? You came here for Beastars, and this weirdo furry who calls himself LC Lupus, ridiculous name by the way, is just talking about the real-world consumption of meat. I don't want to think about how my dietary choices are actually morally wrong. I just want to watch a video about this furry anime that I like. Well, the reason is kind of simple, and it's that Beastars denies reality. In the real world, you and I, provided we are meat eaters, I'm not, but you might be, are able to nicely pretend that we are not complicit in violence. I just buy the plastic wrap piece of a carcass. I cannot be implicit. I simply cannot. But in Beastars, well, you have to acknowledge that meat is a fellow being. Meat is not even made out of animals that we can logic our way into believing are inferior to us. Meat is literally other people in the world of Beastars. You might work in an office with a gazelle, and here you are in the black market, eating one. Beastars re-animalizes, rather than de-animalizes, meat. The Beggar is therefore a perfect introduction. Before we, as the audience, even get to see the black market, we are shown a person who is selling pieces of himself as food for carnivores. We are then introduced to the black market, and our protagonist is immediately overwhelmed by it. He does not want to consume other people, but he has a biological craving for it. This is also why the world of Beastars is not an allegory. Human beings do not have biological cravings for meat. If you are raised without meat, you will never have the desire to consume it. You only like to eat meat because you were raised eating meat. Or at least this is the way that it is for the vast majority of people. Meat is a part of a culture. We have been eating it for as long as we can remember, and so when we are confronted by those who do not wish to eat it, it forces us to consider why we are eating it. And some of us make up excuses. We eat it because it has special proteins, or it's the way it's supposed to be, or God said we can eat it, or some other nonsense. We actually only eat it because we like the taste. We do not have the biological yearning for it on a deep and primal level that can be found in Beastars. De-animalisation is something that leads us to the absent referent. This means that we can disconnect ourselves from the realities of the consumption of flesh. However, in the world of Beastars, this is impossible for the carnivores. There can only be re-animalisation. Many carnivores even hunt and kill people so that they can eat them. They always knew that those people were fellow animals, fellow persons, and so when they eat them, they have to make up reasons for it. The reasons that humans use to justify the consumption of flesh generally has to do with a flat-faced denial of objective reality. In the world of Beastars, that is simply unavailable. You can't deny it. However, many do try to ignore it. They're just chowing some tasty meat. Don't think about where it comes from. Don't think about where it comes from. Don't think about where it comes from. Okay, see, it's fine. But what happens when those who do acknowledge what meat is, what happens to them? The only real case that we receive of this is Legacy. Legacy wants to help herbivores. He does not want to consume any meat. He, during the portion of the story where he is training, because of course there's the training arc, it's an anime, he learns to sit with meat and not eat it. He wants to defeat his own desires. Once he has done so, he does not simply discard that meat. Instead, he buries it. In an interview, Carol J. Adams once stated that meat eaters bury animals in their own bodies. This is true. This is how meat eaters bury the corpses of those they devour. However, Legacy re-animalizes the meat and buries it. He even goes out of his way to discover the names, personalities, jobs, and hobbies of those who have been turned into meat. He gives them the respect of a burial rather than being consumed. He sees them for the persons they were in life rather than as mere meat. We, as humans, have de-animalized the meat we eat, and while there certainly are some animals we have fully animalized and perhaps at times humanized, such as dogs and cats, we have mostly rendered them invisible. We do not want to see the animal, we only want to see the steak on our plate. But wouldn't it be better if we started to see them as animals and not simply as soon-to-be meat? Wouldn't that allow us to have a better world? But I guess not. Animals just taste far too good, don't they? And I guess that's more than enough justification to keep doing what we're doing. Gonna end this one on that fun old dour note, but if you liked it, hey, do the usual nonsense like, subscribe, blah 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 blah. Read my books if you want. The one that may be most thematically relevant to this particular video is the Cyborg Wilderness. You'll find the link below. It's some of the usual commie environmentalist stuff you'd expect from someone like me, but it's also a novella that uses minimal vocabulary, no punctuation marks other than full stops, and no dialogue. It's a weird one. Anyway, I hope that you have a great day /week/month ahead.